Okay, everybody probably recognizes the Walkway when it was a railroad bridge in this picture. And I took that from a hot air balloon when I got interested in the project. The reason I was interested in the Walkway, because I have 4 hobbies. One was biking, and I love to do that. And I was hoping for it to be a bike path. History was another one, and I thought the history is really great on the bridge, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then also photography was my hobby. So I was able to, go up there and take pictures. So the bridge itself was built in 1888. It's a little bit over a mile long. And you can see that half of it is over Poughkeepsie. And if you look at this picture, you'll notice that all the tracks and everything's off over Poughkeepsie. It's just the steel beams over that. So that's important for later on. Over the river, the old railroad is still there. So this picture was taken around 2004, I think. The bridge is 212 feet high. It's a little bit more than a mile long. And it's when it was built in 1888, it was an engineering marvel, and people called it the 8th wonder of the world. So next picture, please.
1 second. Yep.
Okay, so this picture shows on the left, you'll see what is under the water. If you look at the picture of the bridge, you have 4 piers, and what you see on the water is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath each one of those piers is a 60-foot by 100-foot caisson, and it goes down 120 feet. So the diagram of those caissons are on the left, and if you look at it, you'll see that it's wood around, and it has sort of places where they split it up into boxes. And what they did was they dropped that down in the water, kept on taking sand and gravel out. There's 50 feet of water in the Hudson. They went down 120 feet. So they had to dig out 70 feet of sand and gravel. And when I say engineering marvel, imagine doing that in 1888 with the shovels, steam shovels and things like that. Just amazing project that they did. The top picture on the left shows what it looks like from the side. The bottom picture shows what it looks like from the top, and the other one shows the other side. So underneath that bridge, it's held up by these 4 caissons, and it was very difficult to put the caissons in the water. And when we had them inspected, turns out they haven't moved an inch in 120 years. And that's what holds the bridge up. The stone toppings are just on the top. I think it goes down about 10 feet before you get to those caissons. So just unbelievable that they could create this bridge back in 1888. Okay, next picture. That was how they put the top on those caissons. When the caissons were in the water, they put scaffolding up. And again, just imagine trying to put that scaffolding up over the Hudson River with the ability in that day, ships they had in those days probably didn't even have engines. And they put all that scaffolding up to create the top of the bridge to go up 212 feet. So again, when I say it's an engineering marvel, just mind-boggling that they could do that. And next picture. When I first went up on the bridge, we scraped off some of the rust, and Andrew Carnegie's name was on the steel beams. And the reason that's important, Carnegie made the steel for the bridge, and he put a lot of iron in the steel. They were just I just discovered steel back in the 1880s, and he made sure that it was built sturdy because he was the investor in the bridge too. In order to ship goods from coal from Pennsylvania was one of the reasons why he got involved in the project. And the bridge was built by private entrepreneurs. They didn't have any ownership of any railroads, but they knew that this country was separated by the Hudson River. New England was on one side and the rest of the country was on the west side. And it was a barrier to getting things from manufactured goods to the west and to get coal and grain to New England. So that's why they built the bridge. And Carnegie put so much iron in it that the bridge turned out, when we did the inspection, to be one of the greatest structures ever built. And although it was painted during the war to camouflage it, it really doesn't have to be painted. It's such strong structure. And that next slide. So there's a picture of the bridge with a train crossing it. And in the beginning, it opened in 1888. There was very light trains. There were 2 tracks across it. But in the early 1900s, trains got heavier and longer, so they reduced it to 1 track. But there were 2 tracks when they approached the bridge, and the trains lined up to get across the bridge. In its heyday of shipping goods from the west to the east and vice versa, 50 trains a day crossed the bridge with a string of freight cars, and the total number of cars in those 50 trains were 3,500 in that. So and that's how busy that line was. Which the reason I'm telling you this is because for history's sake alone, this bridge should have been saved. The country grew and prospered largely because of this bridge, shipping goods back and forth. All right, next picture. Also, it was the longest bridge in North America when it was built. We also think it was the longest bridge in the world, but somebody, I think, recently found out there was a bridge in Scotland that was about 30 feet longer than our bridge. So for years and years, the bridge shipped things across. It looks to me like this big part of this is missing from my picture. Can you see on the right of this picture the troop? Oh no, was that in the last picture? I don't remember seeing it. I guess looks like it's blocked. All right, I'll skip over that, but I'll tell you the story. Reason I have a picture of a guard, a United States soldier, a trooper, guarding the bridge. And the reason that was done is because during the wars, World War I and World War II, oh yeah, he is in the, I'm sorry, I missed that. You see the picture on the right of the guard with the rifle? That is a person guarding the bridge so that the enemy didn't blow it up back in the World War I and World War II. I'm not even sure which, I think that might be World War I. But that was because troops crossed the bridge to go to the wars in both, I think, World War I and World War II. And those troops went through Poughkeepsie. And some of them would throw down or send down boxes to get food. And the women in Poughkeepsie would put food in the boxes for the troops to eat while they waited to get across the bridge. And some of them, the women would put notes in there with their addresses, and a lot of them would write to the women. And I've heard of 3 people who got married as a result of that connection, of having crossed the bridge and met a woman who was down 200 feet below and started writing to him, and then they got married after the war. Next picture. I used to tell this story when I was doing presentations, and people used to at least react. It's hard when you're telling these stories not to hear any reaction. So it's a hard situation. So anyway, the railroad was very busy up until the 1950s. And then the interstate highway system took over transportation of goods. and trucks replaced railroads for all practical purposes in many of the areas of this country. And that's why the railroad started to lose money. The New Haven Railroad bought up some smaller railroads, but eventually they were losing money too. So it got back to, instead of 50 trains a day crossing, there were very few trains crossing the bridge. They also built a bridge up in Selkirk, which crossed the Hudson River. When this bridge was built back in 1888, it was the only bridge across the Hudson River because that was why they built it. When they shipped goods across, they had to put them on ferries to get it across the Hudson River. So in the 1970s, the railroad was down to sending only one train a day across the bridge. The bridge railroad people asked to abandon it, but Congress wouldn't let them. And on 1974, May, a train went across the bridge, and after it went across, the tracks caught fire, and there was no one there to put it out. In the old days, they always had that problem because there's a downhill grade going into Poughkeepsie. They hit the brakes, and it would start the ties on fire, or the wooden walkways. So they always had a crew to put out the fires. But in this situation, they didn't. And a lot of people think that that was the way the railroad was able to abandon the bridge, because this fire burned over Poughkeepsie about 1,000 feet. And the railroad talked right in the beginning, and I was around then, I remember it. They talked about fixing the bridge, but about a month after it burned, they got Congress to agree to let them abandon it. So the bridge was abandoned in 1974, and it was about 1,000 feet of difference. I often talk about, and some of the people that were on our committee to get the walkway done, talk about the magic of the bridge or the miracles that helped our ability to get it done. But one of the miracles was this fire only burned a 1,000-foot section. The local fire people put it out. And if it would have burned more of it, or could have burned all the way over to Highland, we wouldn't have been able to do the bridge because we wouldn't have been able to go out on it. So the fact that it only burned over Poughkeepsie was one of those miracles in the history of the walkway over the Hudson, or one of the magic of the bridge is that it didn't have to be destroyed because only a 1,000-foot section burned. Next picture. Oh, this is a book. I put this in because it's Bridging the Hudson, and that book was done around 1994, I think. And it's a great book on the history of the bridge, part of which I just told you. And Walkway sells that book. So if you get to the Walkway, you can probably go online and get it too, I think. But anyway, it's a great book, tells the history. It does mention the start of the desire to turn it into a walkway that Bill Sépé was starting to do. So I think he was doing that around 1992. So the book came out around 1994, and it mentions the first board of directors, and I was on the organization in those days. Next picture. So I wanted to change this. Can you go ahead to the one with this? Yeah, they were put in the wrong order. So this is what the bridge looked like when I first went up in 1993. And this is over the river. As I said, over Poughkeepsie, the tracks were burned and they were all taken off, but they left everything over the river. And on the Highland side, you could walk out on the bridge, and a lot of kids did it in those days, and probably adults too. And one of the miracles, I think, is that no one ever fell off the bridge from 1974 until 1992. it was wide open for people to walk through the woods and get on the bridge. And kids used to party up there and things like that. So this is what it looked like. It was in pretty bad shape. And everybody thought the bridge was going to fall down because pieces of wood would fall off. But that was the wooden walkways that were on both sides. The tracks down the middle is one train track, but it has guide rails on it. That's why it looks like, you know, more than just one train track, but it was just one track when it did it. That in the distance is my son. I had gone up with Bill Sépé. So now I'm going to tell you, and we'll keep this picture there, the story of Bill Sépé. Bill was a local resident, lives on Gifford Street, he still does, and he was the first one to mention the Walkway project around 1992, and he wanted to turn it into a walkway for just local people. And he also didn't want any public funding to be involved with it. And he wanted volunteers to do the project. And he formed the organization of Walkway Over the Hudson and made it into a membership corporation and started going to street fairs and to publicize turning it into a walkway. His concept was for just local people to use it. He wanted it to be very quiet and peaceful and people to go up and enjoy it that way. He wanted volunteers to do the whole project. He didn't believe public funds should be used for anything like this. Public funds, in his mind, should only be used for health and education. And I didn't know that until many years later, but I feel this is probably one of the most healthy places for people to go, enjoy, and also to get exercise. So, you know, I'm sorry that he thought that way, but that was why it didn't get done. So he made every effort to do it from 1992 to 2000. And he took me up on the bridge. I heard him give his spiel about changing this into a walkway, and I told him I'd be glad to help him. My reason was for helping him because I thought it'd be a great walkway plus a bike path. What I didn't know is he didn't want bikes on the bridge. But I guess he let me help because I had been known in the community for doing bike riding and for different things. And I guess he thought I could help him. So I did help him. I helped him get insurance. And then he did a lot of good things. He started the organization. He got people to join, and he raised funds. And then he started letting the volunteers, who were mostly people he put together, a group of maybe 100 people who were going to help him just take the ties off. Not the ties, sorry. Just take the rails off, turn the ties sideways so they were flatter, and put wooden planks on top of the deck. And I don't even think he was going to replace the railing. He was going to fix the railing up, and it would be a very narrow path, and people would just be able to walk it. And that was his plan. He was going along, and he started having the volunteers work on it, and somebody threw a wire off the bridge, and a fire started. I mean, the guy got not dead, but he was electrocuted, but he survived, but he was burned very badly. And that was in the year 2000. And the town of Lloyd then got a court order stopping Bill from doing any work on the bridge in 1990. The one other good thing, I don't forget if I mentioned it, that Bill did was he did get a deed to the bridge. He bought it for $1. And that was because the bridge was abandoned by the railroad. They didn't have any use for it after a while. In the beginning, they had a use for it because they were collecting money for wires on the bridge, but the wires were taken down and put under the river. So the railroad sold it to a guy who just did it as a lark in Pennsylvania for $1. And Bill Sépé somehow went down and got him to sign a deed over for $1 also. And that's how Walkway got to own the bridge. Of course, Poughkeepsie was taxing the bridge, and so was Highland, because it was private property. So bills on both sides, there were tax bills that were not paid, and Town of Lloyd wound up buying the piece over in their section in Ulster County, but the city of Poughkeepsie just let it keep on building up. So at the time Walkway purchased it, there was a $500,000 tax bill due on the bridge. So Bill, for 2000 is when the person got hurt. Town got a court order stopping all work, but Bill Sépé kept on going to court to try to get that lifted. And he did that for 2 or 3 years. So in 1993, a group of people started talking about how can we get this turned into a walkway. And over the years, I stayed involved with it while Bill still was running it, and we could still take people up. I took quite a few people up. I didn't do many because he was leading the organization, and it also, at some point, I felt it was pretty dangerous to let people walk on it the way it was, and he was not really directing them to go in any particular way. So I got nervous, and I backed off helping him, but I did keep the key, and I took people up now and then. But in 1994, I was approached by a group of people, said that they would like to have a meeting to see if we could do something about the situation. The project was at a standstill. So I'm sitting in my office on Raymond Avenue, and I was busy working in those days. So I said, well, I'll meet with you as long as it can be at my office. And I sat at the desk opposite me, and I worked while they sat at the table I'm at right now. And they talked about different ways in order to get the project done and moving again. And, I was, I guess, not enthusiastic because I knew it was going to be a really tough job. And I thought it would be a good idea. Okay, thanks for shifting the picture. So what happened was we met here, and Bill had set it up as a membership organization. So the members voted on the board of directors, and the board of directors elected Bill Sépé as chairman, and they were all friends of his. So we decided to put up our own group of people for directors. And for the annual election of 1994, which was in January of 1994, and we picked 6 people. For some reason, there are 8 directors, but there were only, and I don't remember the details, there were only 6 positions to be voted on. So we picked 6 people who felt that we could do a better job than Bill to get it started. And Bill put up his 6 people, and we had a vote. And it turned out that the vote was 4 of his people, 3 of his people were elected, and 3 of ours were elected, and that was 6. And I guess there were 2 that stayed on. So it was a tie vote, and it looked like we had lost. But one of Bill's people decided that it was better to have us run the organization. So he announced that, and I was the one that was picked to be chairman during this period of time. They asked me if I would do it, so I did it. And actually, I got the most votes. It was like 230 votes. I got 179. Bill Sépé got 160, and then the other 6 people got, various amounts. But this other person, who was Bill's person, decided to vote on our side. And when Bill Sépé heard that, he resigned. So in January of 1994, I became chairman of the Walkway organization. And again, if we didn't get that person resigned, we wouldn't have been anywhere. and it'd probably still be back into the old state. So it was kind of a miracle that we were able to win the election itself. And then, so I became chairman and did a couple of things. The first thing we did, and I had a board of directors of 7 other people, and we all took things to do. Some of them did the payroll or became financial people, and others took care of the property itself because we owned the bridge, and it was a big liability because things were falling off of it, and then so. But the things I did at that stage, I met with the town of Lloyd and settled the lawsuit that was pending. And the miracle of this thing was that I said to him, but in order for us to proceed with the project, we really need to take people up there. And luckily, the town attorney knew me and told them that they could trust me to take people up safely. And I was supposed to take 5 people up at most on the bridge, but and I started doing that right in the beginning. The other things we did was change the goal. We were not going to use volunteers to do the work. We agreed that we would hire professionals to do the work and that we would use volunteers to raise the funds to pay the professionals to do the job. I'm just looking at my notes here a second. Okay. There's one other thing I was trying to think of that happened. Okay, I guess it was, we got permission to take people out on the bridge. We settled the lawsuit, and we changed the policy that we would use public funding to get the bridge done, because that was the only practical way to do it. In those days, even I estimated the cost to only be about $5 million to do the project. As you might know, it turned out to be 38 million, but we went on our merry way. And we started by having, Bill Sépé did some of these things too. He set up a booth in the Raymond Avenue town meetings, or town street fair, I guess it was. And that, so it started at that level. You can see we had a little bulletin board that had pictures of the bridge, and we gave out information. And then the other things we did was I started talking to groups. I talked to Lions Club, event, things like that, and tried to get people interested in the project. I'm looking at my watch. We're going pretty late, aren't we?
Yeah.
I gotta get started. All right. So,
Okay.
so we move that, next picture then. Yeah. Oh, so one of the first things I did, and this goes back to 1993, when Bill Sépé took me up on the bridge in 1993, first time it was just with him, and he showed me the bridge. I fell in love with it. So 2 weeks later, I asked him if I could bring somebody up with me, and he said yes. And I called Rob Dyson. Rob Dyson is a person that lives out in Millbrook, and his father had a foundation. I was casual friends with Rob. Our sons were good friends, and I did some bicycle riding with him. And I said, Rob, you've got to see this. I knew he was a fun guy, and he did race car driving, so I knew he had a little bit of spirit of adventure in him. So I asked him to come up with me, and he did. And he loved the project, but what happened, he thought it was too unsafe to let people do the work that Bill Sépé was doing. So from 1993 to 2004, Rob and I would every now and then say, one of these days we got to get the bridge done. But we knew with Sépé had ownership of it, he didn't, we would never get it done. And Rob wasn't interested in getting involved, same way I backed off a little bit. But in 2004, after we got things settled and we started the organization, because of the person who got burned, had a bad reputation, we had to build it up again. And we started doing that by just going around and talking to groups and that. And then, of course, we called the Dyson Foundation. And we did convince Rob to have the Dyson Foundation help us. And I had a good feeling for that because Dyson Foundation did a lot of good things in the community. And in the beginning, when I first called Rob 14 years before, or 10 years before, I kind of knew he would be the key to this. And once we got his foundation involved, we were able to start moving along. We got a few grants. Why don't we go forward? Next picture. Oh, so we started taking people up, and you can see that's Mark Adams from Adams Periodical Farm. Basically, for a couple of years, I just emailed people and told them to meet me at the bridge. And I started with 4 or 5, but I could do it safely because I walked down the middle on the boards, and we had this grading in there. So gradually, I got from 5 people. By the time we got the bridge going, it was taking 30 or 40 people at a time up. But we did it very safely because we stayed on that grade. Next picture. Okay, one of the key magical things here was, this is a postcard that I found on eBay that shows that the bridge was, a bridge was built across the Harlem River in New York City for Henry Hudson's 300th anniversary of having sailed up the Hudson River. And when I found this postcard, I thought, well, if they built the bridge across the Harlem River for the 300th anniversary, why don't we do the Walkway project for the 400th anniversary, which was coming up in 1909. So I think I found this postcard around 1990, oh no, say the year 2000 or something. And I held on to it. But when I started doing my presentations, I put it in and I mentioned to everybody. And that was a thing that turned out to be a very good thing, because when Rob Dyson got involved with the project, he did a lot of good things. And one was contacting New York State. And he was able to make the connection with Governor Spitzer. And Spitzer did agree for the same things. I'm going to have to move it along quickly, so I'm going to skip a lot of more details to it. Yeah, so Rob talked to New York State, and we got them motivated to do the walkway in honor of Henry Hudson's 400th anniversary. And that got us $20 million from New York State that Spitzer put in that. Then also, Congressman Hinchy is in this picture. He gave us our first grant. It was before that, when I just talked about the 20 million. And Congressman Hinchy was very much in favor of it. And he gave us a lot of credibility. We wound up not using his money because it was difficult to get for our project, but we used it for the lights at the end of the project. But he did a great job of promoting it in the area. Got a lot of people thinking that now maybe we were serious when we got his money, and that was around 2005, I think. Next picture. We went along, and basically what I did was try to build up the momentum by taking people on the bridge, by talking to individuals and groups like Lions Club, Rotary Clubs, and everything like that. And I did that from 2004 until 2007. And we built up momentum in the community for it. And then Dyson Foundation came in, and they started helping us. And I'm trying to find a date here, key date. Okay, May of 2007, we knew we were getting to the point where we had to get moving quickly if we were going to get it done for 2009. And we met with Rob Dyson, myself, Dave Rocco was on the board. And during this period, the board members were doing a lot of things too. And I think 3 or 4 of us went out to Millbrook, sat down with Rob. Rob hadn't been too involved directly, but he had a executive director, Diana Gorieva, who was our contact. But we had gotten one grant to do inspections of the underwater piers And we had also gotten some money to do a little bit of a plan as to what we wanted to do with the bridge. But when we met with him in May of 2007, we said we had contacted a firm that thought they could get the walkway done, turn it into a walkway by 2009. So we went to Rob and we said, Rob, if we're going to do it, we got to get started now. And Rob said, all right, we'll give you $1.5 million and get the bridge inspected so we can see if it's feasible to do, because the bridge was in bad shape, as you could tell from the pictures. So, you know, we all walked out of the office almost fainting, because now we had $1.5 million up to this point. I think the most we had in our thing was probably a couple $1,000 and that. So we had to hire people from Colorado, not from Colorado. We hired engineers, but they had to go to Colorado to get taught how to rappel off bridges, because they had to look at every inch of the bridge to make sure it was safe, and do things to make sure that we could put the walkway on top. It cost $1 million to do this inspection. It took about 2 months. But, and these are two of the engineers rappelling off the bridge. And as I said, that was around May when we got the money. And I think they did this around September or October of 2007. Next picture. We had to have a public hearing to turn the, to get the environmental issues taken care of. It's a technical term, I won't bother explaining it. Usually I take an hour to do this. I'm trying to cut it short, but you have to have a public hearing to make sure the public doesn't have any legitimate reasons not to do it. And one of the things I did was when I took everybody up on the bridge, I carried a pack of pictures with me, and I'd show people the bridge, and I got everybody's email address. So I sent out 245 emails to people before the public hearing, and luckily 500 of them showed up, and probably other people showed up too, because, you know, everybody was promoting it. But everyone there was in favor of the project, and New York State, Rob had gotten New York State involved in it at that point, and they couldn't believe how much the people were in favor of it. They said, usually you don't get that many people unless people are against something, and that. So that made us feel pretty good. Oh, and this was done after the inspection came back. Let me go back to the inspection. The inspection showed that the bridge was one of the greatest structures ever built. And it turned out one of the miracles is that they gave us a price for it, and it doesn't sound like a miracle, it was $43 million. But the miracle was that they also gave us a price for tearing down the bridge, and that price was $53 million. So now we had the community behind it, we had support, we had Henry Hudson's money for the Hudson, but we also had a good practical reason for restoring the bridge, because it would cost $53 million to tear it down. So we were actually saving $10 million of probably state money in that. Like I said, that was a really good break. There were a lot of things that happened along the way that got this moving. Next picture we go. I can skip over that one. Okay, so with Dyson's help, we started getting people to help with the bridge. As I said, we weren't using volunteers. We got in this picture, the lady on the right, on the left, is Amy. She became an executive director. The Dyson Foundation gave us the money for that. The person in the back is Peter Maluski, I think his name is. And he was the engineer that we hired. And he was the only engineer of the group that we talked to who thought he could get it done by 2009. Tara Sullivan is in the center. She was the person in charge of doing the quadricentennial celebration up in Albany. And Rob had made the connection with her in Albany, and she was the one that helped us get get the governor behind it too. And the funny thing, I remember her calling me one day. She was in Albany. And she said, "Now, why are we doing this project? What's the advantage of it?" And but at this time, we were pushing it, in that it was something that would be good for Poughkeepsie and would bring Poughkeepsie alive again. That it was an economic incentive because IBM had downsized, and now we needed, some industry. And I was promoting tourism, so I thought it'd be a great tourist attraction. And she talked to Albany, and they put that $20 million in the dollars and in the pot for us to use, the 20 million. Now, this can be coming a little out of order because I'm rushing through it and because I usually have more photographs, but okay, next picture. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Senator Schumer, I am. On the right, the Senator Schumer, who, again, the Dyson Foundation put us in contact with him, and he came up to the bridge, and he was a big help because the bridge ended at Washington Street, and CSX owned the land from Washington Street over to the Dutchess Rail Trail. And it was about a mile of land. And if we didn't get that land from CSX, we would not be able to have an exit on the Poughkeepsie side because it ended in the air there. We'd have to put a stairs just down to Washington Street. That would be it, which we didn't think was available. So Senator Schumer played a key role in getting CSX to give us that land. I can't remember if we paid for it or not, but it was such a close thing. Dutchess County tried to negotiate it, and it fell apart because Dutchess County asked for too much from CSX. So CSX said no. So Schumer had to break the ice again with CSX. And we didn't get the deed to the land on the other side. I literally got it on Friday before the bridge opened in 2009. They let us put the parking lot in, but we didn't have title of that until the day before the bridge opened. One of these little cute little things about the story of the history. So this group of people, again, these are people who were some board members, but the fellow in the center with the white hair and the glasses on, he was Mike Duffy, and the Dyson Foundation hired him as our project manager. And Mike did a lot of work on the hospital for Dyson Foundation on Marist College, and Mike was our project manager to get the project done, and he did a great job in that. Next picture. So we finally, groundbreaking ceremony, May of 2008. After the inspection was done, it turned out the bridge was one of the greatest structures ever built, would hold the walkway. We had designs done, and we had a groundbreaking ceremony. And by this time, everybody was in favor of the project. Maurice Henchy's on the left, fell from Cena Cutson, Ned, can't think of his last name. Behind him is a state representative, Jim Sproat. Jim played a key role. I don't have time to tell you what he played in it, but he became the bridge authority. But he had helped me with the Dutchess Rail Trail, myself. And then I can't remember this lady's name, but she was New York State's financial person, and Steve Saland. But literally everybody was, was getting behind it, and they played a key role in helping us get along. And one of the things we did, we met, Rob made the connection with New York State, but I went to Albany with him to meet with Carol Ash. She's the one that's in the back, you can hardly see. She was the commissioner of New York State Parks, and she was the one that I did my little slide presentation, and she agreed to take it over as a state park after we did the bridge. The reason we did the bridge, we could do it quicker because we weren't tied up with state regulations. So we could get the bridge done, but we agreed to turn it over to New York State when it was done. And that's part of the, this is a little complicated, but the whole thing would take me forever to talk to you about, but that's why I'm going to write the history of it pretty soon. Anyway, so after we did the groundbreaking ceremony, the first step was to take everything off the bridge, the ties and the railings, and we got down to the steel. And the cost to do it was 38 million, of which originally it was 43 million, but we reduced it to 38 to save a little money. And that's why it's a little short, little less width most of the bridge, just with the lookouts, a little bit of that thing. So we had to cut the cost a little bit, but we took all this, everything off, and that took about 2 months in the middle of 2008. Next picture, oh, on the right, that shows a picture of me doing my little presentation. I believe I did between 50 to 100 presentations to groups. This was the one to the Chamber of Commerce. And so for 3 or 4 years, I did them before we did the construction. And then also I still do them every now and then. But I did the same slideshow basically you've seen up to this point. And that. Okay, so this is the construction. The picture on the right is when they were taking everything off. Picture on the left is the panels. Now we put the first panel in on September 9th, 2009. And we started on the east side and put the panels in. Panels weighed 14 tons a piece over land and 18 tons over the river because they were longer over the river. And they were made up in Saratoga and they were shipped down by car and then they were put in. And we started the project, putting the first panel in was on September 9th, 2009. When we had the groundbreaking, Poughkeepsie Journal had a poll and they said we'd never get it done by Henry Hudson's anniversary, which was October of 2009. So we actually had about a year and 2 months to get it done. And that's just a sample. This work went on all winter of 2009. Why don't you go to the next picture, see where we are there. Going back. Okay, so the first panel went in September 2009. This picture is putting the last panel in. You can see the blank before. Well, I was standing on the west side. The winter was very cold, so we had to do it from both sides eventually. And this is where they met in the middle. And this was on September, that's odd, September 9th, 2009. I think it was a couple of days later, but it took exactly 1 year to put all the panels on. And we got them on, and we had a celebration on the bridge for that. And the only thing left, but we only had less than a month because the October 3rd was when we had the opening scheduled for. So the railings had to go on and all that was put on. Next picture. Oh, and it did fit, the last panel fit in that space where the bridge was. So we got everything done and lo and behold, we had the opening of the bridge on October 3rd. And what had happened during the process, Spitzer lost his position with the governorship. Patterson is one next to me who was governor at the time. Carol Ash, who was the parks head, is there on the right. And on the left, Rob Dyson is behind me, and Spitzer, Schumer is down there. And this was the opening celebration. It was a little bit raining a little bit, but it was a great day and we had a nice parade. Next picture. Oh, that's the parade. And that's my granddaughter. She always thought it was my bridge because I used to take her up there so much. And for years, she really thought so. And she used to draw pictures of it and everything. So we had a parade for the opening celebration. Next picture. Pete Seeger was out on the bridge. And this is probably the only time my eyes teared up during that opening ceremony was when he sang "This Land Is Your Land." I'm still tearing up. Next picture. So the bridge opened. I love it because everybody's using it. Bicyclists. The picture on the left is one I've taken very much like yesterday. It was beautiful yesterday too. But as you know, 40,000 people showed up when it opened on the first weekend. Everybody was shocked. We had to get parking. I had to get shuttle buses to run people over from the train station, and people park downtown. And we had shuttle buses bringing people to the walkway. On the right is the first bike ride I led on Sunday morning of the opening weekend. And the fellow on the left is a Dutch business person, and he's on a Dutch bike, and they gave me a Dutch bike. You can't, I don't know if you can see it. I can't see it because the pictures are lined up, but I'm on the right in that picture of the bikes, and I'm on the Dutch bike that they gave me. And of course, I did it because I was promoting trails. I got, I'm just almost done. I just want to say the reason, one of the best reasons I did it was because I wanted it to connect to the Dutchess Rail Trail. And I'll tell the story some other time, but I was the one that was instrumental in getting the Dutchess Rail Trail done at some point. And that's how Jim Sproke got involved, because he helped me with Dutchess County, get Dutchess County to do the Dutchess Rail Trail, and ultimately made the connection with that. Okay. So this is one of the miracles or magic things about the walkway. And I swear some of the board members think the bridge is magic, but on the first day of spring and the first day of autumn, the sun comes up right in line with the bridge. And the reason I got this picture is because when I turned the keys over to New York State, because it was their park after the opening celebration, they didn't want to open until 8 a.m. and I wanted everybody to see the sunrise. So we had an argument. The bottom line was, if you want to do it yourself. So I kept the keys, and I still have the keys. Every Saturday and Sunday, I open the gates so people can see the sunrise. I did it every day in the beginning, but that was too much. And I was out there opening, this is the first year in spring, and 4 kids came out and rode across on their bikes by themselves into the sunrise. And I couldn't believe it, that they gave me this great photo op. And it was the first time I had ever seen it, because I hadn't been up there for the first day of spring before and that. So every first day of spring and fall comes up. So anyway, that's a quick version of it. I guess we're going to do some questions and answers. We have time.
Got a big virtual round of applause for Fred Schaeffer. I know most of you are on mute, so it'll be a silent round of applause.
Okay.
But I've been fortunate enough. My name's Jeff Brault. I'm the marketing communications director for the Walkway. I've been fortunate enough to hear that story several times, and every time that we hear it, it just you learn something new, and you get a new, fresh appreciation for the work that Fred and Bill Sépé and all the original folks did to make this thing what it is today. A little more context to the numbers that Fred gave you at the end, the attendance numbers. Over 400,000 people attended the first year, which was from October 3rd to December 31st. Each of the last 4 years, over 500,000 people have attended. And last year alone, 621,280 people came to the Hudson Valley to enjoy the walkway over the Hudson. So it's just so cool and so great to have something like this in our community. And a big thank you goes to Fred. Also really
Am I still on? Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on, Fred.
I just tell one quick, sorry. When I made the presentation on the up in Albany for the to get the state involved, I was supposed to keep the presentation to 5 minutes, and I kept on going for like a half hour. And the woman who was in charge wound up standing in front of the screen to block my pictures before I finally quit.
Well, fortunately, we can't do that virtually.
Right.
So it's a very captive audience. We're also not allowed to leave our houses. So you have a very captive audience.
Right, that's good.
And speaking of, we're tremendously gratified. This is our first ever virtual lecture. That 100 people came to participate in this. That's our capacity for the system that we're on here. So we may need to look into more capacity. And like Fred mentioned, almost everything that we do when the walkway is on a volunteer basis. It's through donations from people that feel inclined to support our mission. And if you folks that are on this call feel that way and are able to do that, you can visit walkway.org/donate and throw a couple dollars in the virtual tip jar. We also are trying to make it as easy as possible for people to do that from their homes. You can do it from your smartphone through a text message. You just text the word Walkway to 845-203-2260, and you'll see that number on the screen, and we'll also email it to everyone who participated. You'll be able to make a donation right from your smartphone. The whole process takes like 2 minutes. It's really easy. So the other good news about being here in a virtual lecture is we've got plenty of time for questions and answers. A lot of you folks are already taking advantage of the chat function over on the right. If you have a question for Fred or for any of the Walkway staff folks that are on the chat, type it into the box, and we'll be happy to get that answered. While you're thinking of those questions, happy to let everyone know two things. One, if you want to relive this fascinating lecture, or you have friends that couldn't get to see it who want to see it, we've recorded it, and we'll be posting video to our Facebook page, facebook.com/walkwayoverthehudson, as soon as possible, basically as soon as we can process it. So it should be up a little bit later this afternoon, and everyone will be able to watch the full replay on demand. Secondly, the Walkway Over the Hudson, we're happy to say, as are most New York State parks and trails, is still open at this time. Governor Cuomo and the New York State Department of Health and the Commissioner of New York State Parks have decided that open spaces should remain open for people to get outside and enjoy a nature break. So the walkway is still open. We're very happy about that. Although obviously because of what's going on in the world, there are some special considerations that we ask everyone take into account when visiting. So if you go to walkway.org, you'll see a link at the top of the page that tells you all that you need to know about how to safely use the walkway at this time, both for your safety and for others. Okay, we did get a question coming in, and it's my favorite question. It comes from Tina Vaitkis, and it's, how do you count the people on the bridge? This is probably our most popular question. How do we get the attendance numbers? And the answer is that they actually hand count the people that are on the bridge. So if you spend enough time on the walkway, you'll notice that every couple of hours, a New York State Parks vehicle traverses the span back and forth. They are literally counting how many people they pass. And they do that every few hours, and the walkway is open for 8 to 12 hours a day, give or take, depending on the time of year that it is. And statisticians have told us that that is the best and most accurate way to get a count. That the number of times they'll undercount will be balanced out by the number of times they overcount, and we end up getting a pretty accurate sample. So I always enjoy telling people that, how do you count 600,000 plus people a year? You count them one by one. And then there's no digital trackers, there's no turnstiles, there's no special trick to it. It is a straight count.
They actually count every 10th person.
A couple of other questions coming in here.
So Jeff, there is one for Ronald Salk, and Fred talked about this a couple days ago at the public meeting. Were there any objections?
No, none at all.
On the giant public
Back
meeting.
to you, Fred.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah, no, there were no objections. And that's what New York State people that were there. The presentation was given by the engineering firm, and they told what the project was and what the pros and cons were.
Environmental.
You know, and like I say, everybody there came in favor of it. There was a whole really good feeling at things, and there was no objections to it at all. Yeah.
Okay. The next from Peter is the guide rails next to the actual track. Did they have extra equipment or attached to the guide rails?
No, it would just, if the train went off the track, it would keep it from going too far. So that's why the second railing was there.
Fred, Jim asks what the panels on the walkway are made of.
Cement. They're, you know, I don't think it's any special type of cement. That was pretty much cement. They're not solid. Like I said, they did weigh 14 tons, and the reason over land there were more pillars to hold the bridge up, but over the river there's only those 4 big ones. So the steel is much bigger. So they weighed 18 tons over the river, and there's a little bit of a gap underneath, like it's like a bathtub upside down. But they're pretty thick. But it's not fully squared off.
Fred, Robert asks when they moved the electrical lines on the old bridge. When did they move them, and what did they do to replace them?
Yeah, that's one of those miracles. What it was, the electrical lines were sent. Yeah, what's the? I'm drawing a blank on the Central Hudson, right? Yeah, Central Hudson. And the bridge was originally sold to some investors, and they were collecting rent for the wires that were on the bridge, and I think it was $4,000 a month. And they tried to raise the rent to $10,000 a month. So Central Hudson put the wires under the river, and then they abandoned the wires. So those wires stayed on the bridge until we did the construction. But the miracle was that if Central Hudson didn't do that, Sépé would have never gotten that bridge for $1. What happened, and this is strange, the investors were collecting that money for the rent, and they were divvying it up amongst themselves. They were supposed to be giving it to the railroad.
Oh.
They were keeping it. And when they lost the money coming in, they sold the bridge to a guy who was just doing it as a lark. He was just a railroad buff, and he was in Pennsylvania. He's the one that was in the telephone booth. That was his phone number, was in the telephone booth. But the wires stayed until we took them off when we did the construction.
Another one is, did ship and boat traffic continue up and down the river during the scaffolding and construction in the 1880s?
Well, boat traffic did. It was a big fight to get the bridge built. In fact, the biggest thing was the shipping industry then had tall masts, and that's why one of the reasons why the bridge was so high, because the shipping industry, which was equivalent of the railroad industry eventually, but the shipping industry in those days was a big industry, and they tried to stop having the bridge built. But one of the people in Poughkeepsie purposely ran for county legislator or state legislator so he could convince all the state legislators to let them build a bridge across the Hudson. And it had to be built high enough, though, for all the high mast ships to go underneath it. And I'm sure there was a provision for them to go underneath the bridge, because that was a really big problem in those days.
Can I, Jeff, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, so one of the things, so Fred, thank you so much, but there's so many stories, as you know, you could be on here for hours, but when the cabling was taken off, one of the gentlemen that worked up on the bridge is Michael Chichone, and he developed a sculpture. He made a sculpture. It's called Momentum. And we had a dedication a few years ago. I know Frank Pillay was there. Frank's on this call, and a few other people were there. But if you go down to Upper Landing Park now, there's this wonderful sculpture called Momentum, which is actually made from the cables that were taken off of the bridge before construction. And so that's honoring not only the electrical workers and some of the people that worked on the bridge, but also the memory of the trains there. So go to Upper Landing and check that out.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat. If you look back at Fred's first picture from the walkway, you see what the railings used to look like. The posts that are in the old railings are still in the park today. They ring the areas with the picnic tables at both the Ulster Welcome Center and the Duchess Welcome Center. There's some original pieces of track that are down at the Orchard Place staircase on the Dutchess County side of the walkway. The old signal light is still up. You can see that as you approach the bridge from the east. So there's a number of those artifacts that are available. And if you want to own a piece of bridge history, those railroad spikes that Fred and the team were holding on dedication, you can get those on our website at shop.walkway.org.
And one more thing, if you have any of the railroad, we had to go out and find them. And fortunately, enough of you that had bought or gotten the original railings gave them back to us, and we were able to put them up. So if you have any, there's still more construction projects to be done. Since the bridge opened, there's been another $10 million at least in construction that has continued to finish aspects of the bridge. So But if you have those, you know, we would love to, we would love to get a donation. So thanks to those of you who did that already.
Do you also want, I have a picture from when Fred did one of his tours of my feet and my kids' feet looking down through the slats of the railroad bridge. And I don't know if you collect those things for history, if you want them, because he took us over, and I do have a picture of the railing and then our feet looking down through the open slats. So.
Yeah, I
Yes.
just need to get
Back
to them.
God,
I've taken probably 10,000 pictures, but I don't know whether I got something like that particular one. So
Okay.
I would be glad to have anything.
Well, when I get back to New York, I don't have it in Texas, but I'll take a
Great.
look.
And also, I want to thank Kevin Gallagher's I know he's on the call. So the Poughkeepsie Library is holding archives for us. So a lot of the archival material that's valuable is being stored at the Poughkeepsie Library. So thanks to them. And we have used Fred's photos all the time. I mean, you know, if you get our mailings and you pay attention, you see hundreds of Fred photos. So thank goodness you took all those photos, Fred. We use them constantly. Jeff keeps looking for new photos and comes back and says, well, Fred's are still the best. So I'm so glad you did that. Thanks.
We'll always take any historical photos or any photos that anyone gets in the park currently. Walkway@walkway.org is our email address. So please feel free to send us anything and everything. We love to see it all and collect it all. And you learn another piece of the history of the bridge every time we see one of those stories. We got a couple more questions that came in that we can answer. One from Patrick. Are there plans to put permanent lighting on the bridge? Aha, there certainly are.
Elizabeth, take 2 minutes to answer. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. I will. Thanks. Fred.
The lighting plan is in progress right now and is very, very far along. Fred mentioned the activity of our board members. Our board chair, John Stork. I hope you're still on, John. Yes, I see it. John.
I can talk to that.
Amenity committee, and can give everyone a full rundown on what we're doing with lighting, John.
There are plans. We, thanks to our successful grant applications, we're in design with a world-class design group for lighting the bridge. Mock-ups are scheduled to take place. They were scheduled to take place during this month. That's obviously not going to happen. And we're about halfway towards our goal for a phase 1 completion. So I think things are going to be delayed, but surely in the 21 season, we will see walkway lighting with color changing LEDs that will allow us to greatly augment the evening programs. So it is definitely underway. It's going to be quite nice.
Yeah, that's a significant and transformative project. Probably a good time to mention walkway.org/donate one more time to as quickly as possible, or text Walkway to 845-203-2260.
Great job, Jeff.
Someone from
Jeff, are you available for other organizations? I mean,
Oh,
God, I've checked my calendar. It's wide
no,
open.
not available.
We've gone international. We've got a question from Suffolk, England. When the bridge was first built, how did the scaffolding cope with the tides? I don't have a good enough understanding of either tides or walkway history to know that answer. Does anyone know that? How the bridge handled the interesting tidal environment that is the Hudson River, which of course flows both ways?
Yeah, I don't know. There'd have to be an engineer that would have to figure that one out. I think I don't have no idea.
well,
I have no idea, but as a boater, as someone who's spent a lot of time on the water, it moves in both directions very quickly. I'm sure a lot
one of the
people second that.
interesting things is how far it's changed. So back in history, the brackish, the tidal area has come farther up the Hudson River, which environmentally has caused a number of problems with different invasive species and different things that have happened. So I don't know the exact, through the centuries, but the tidal line has dramatically changed over the last several hundred years. So that might be just something to look into in terms of where this bridge was positioned in the 1800s.
Frank Palaia, who Elizabeth mentioned, a tremendous artist in the community who's done so much to beautify so many public spaces, has asked if we've ever considered creating a walkway museum. And that is something that has been considered, and I know it's something that we'd love to bring to fruition. Elizabeth, I think you have kind of championed this dream for at least the last couple of years.
Well, I would say too that Judy Moran and David Santner and Dave Rocco and all of those board members with Fred at the time that they spent a decade of their lives, you know, and we're all grateful for that, really wanted a museum. We have explored it in different ways. That's why we're keeping artifacts at the library. We now know, you know, the world has changed so much that there's a lot we can do digitally. Some of you may or may not know John and the current board. We worked very hard for a number of years thinking that the Hoffman Reynolds houses down at Upper Landing Park might be that opportunity. But frankly, we just couldn't figure out how to pay for that. You know, obviously you could get grants money, but operating buildings over time was a difficult, you know, is a hefty financial burden. But we have that, you know, at some day, Judy Moran, who I think is on the call, we will have somewhere where we can display and interpret and share a lot of this fascinating history that Fred has just gone through.
Although not on the top of our list, what has been accomplished in the last few months with the assistance of Parks is now a safe storage repository location in the Parks building. So anybody that has anything, a physical asset, a drawing, obviously if it's digital, that's easy. Anything, please do get it to us, text, email, whatever. And we now have a safe repository location inside Parks building on Parker Avenue to store that. So that is progress.
And Jeff, you want to mention travel stories and a little bit about the talkways. So there's a lot of ways for people to get additional history right now.
Yeah, you can do it, well, right now through our website, if you're not heading up to the bridge. There's a lot of interesting historical information available as an audio tour. Right now, when you look on the side railings of the bridge, you see those panels. There's links on those panels to connect your smartphone to audio stories that give you a little bit more information about whatever that panel might be about. So there are a few about the fire that Fred mentioned in his talk. There are some about the creation of the structure. A lot about the different wildlife that you can see from the bridge, a lot about how the geology of the Hudson River, and how it all works. So you can get that information on our website, and you can also, of course, get it on the bridge. And we're working on ways right now to make that even more accessible and even more in depth. So more information about that is coming soon. But yes, the long story short is preserving the history and telling the historical story is something that's very important to us as an organization, and we want as many people as possible to hear that story and interact with that history. Actually, a very important question asked by Nadine about the lighting project is, will that impact stargazing and will it create light pollution? So that's actually a great concern of ours, is making sure that it doesn't. And we work very closely with the Mid-Hudson Astronomers Association. They come out to all our Walkway at Night events and they bring the telescopes. And they have actually told us that there are ways to install light that actually benefit the telescopes and allow them to see further into the sky and to see greater distances. And they are part of the conversation to make sure that that does not happen when this project.
Short answer is it's absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah.
Short answer, no way.
And then someone else asked, does the elevator close at times? It does. Is the elevator closed right now? It is. It's closed right now because of social distancing guidelines. You can't stay 6 feet apart inside the elevator. It closes 90 minutes prior to when it's able to be open. It closes 90 minutes prior to the park's closing time. It also has to close periodically for maintenance. That's usually scheduled and posted on our website. And it also has to close for high winds and ice and thunderstorms, and the same reasons that the walkway may need to close.
Jeff, just one quick thing. I want to thank Don Katie and Roger Gill and most of you, a lot of you may know about, you know, our ambassadors and how important they are, and a lot of them are on the call now. So this year, the ambassadors have started staffing the elevator in our attempt to have it open. You know, our goal is to have the elevator open whenever the bridge is. And Parks doesn't always have enough staff to do that. So thank you so much to our ambassadors, and more of you I know this year will be signing up to run the elevator when Parks doesn't have the staff. And then you also come to us with great stories about the people that you're meeting, especially from other parts of the world. So the elevator has ended up being another piece of this great connector, and connecting a lot of folks. Just one other quick thing, and then is that we also learned how many people are worried about the accessibility. So in addition to the elevator, we'll be having an 11-person tram come on board this summer as soon as all this is over, so that people with limited mobility and other limitations can get out on the walkway. And again, our ambassadors and our volunteers and our donors are all helping make that happen. So those are a couple, you know, exciting things to come. Back to you, Fred.
I think that's all for questions. So we can give one more big thank you to Fred Schaeffer for taking his time to be our first virtual lecture.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
A sellout event. He has set the bar high for the next one.
Thank you very much, Fred.
The good news is there will be another one. So if you stay tuned to our Facebook page and our website, we're hoping to do as many of these as we can to connect people with the Walkway story and their favorite Walkway activities and things happening in the Hudson Valley at this time. So thank you guys for participating.
Thank
you.
you, Jeff.
And if you want to relive the memories, it'll be on our Facebook page as soon as possible. So we'll make sure that an archive is posted for you to share with your friends.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.